Welcome back to the Consumer Awareness Foundation podcast.
Yes, welcome back, everyone.
Today we are diving deep into a book that is making some serious waves in the personal finance world.
Oh, yeah.
Forgive and Forget: How to Nuke Your Credit Card Debt.
Catchy title.
It is catchy, by Tommy Kilpatrick. He doesn't mince words.
No, he does not.
He calls bank-issued credit card debt a flat-out scam, potentially even unenforceable.
Yeah, he makes some bold claims.
And get this.
Yeah.
He uses a hypothetical courtroom drama to lay out his case.
I love that.
It's such a clever way to break down a complex topic.
Totally.
It's like Law and Order meets personal finance.
Right.
So in this courtroom scene, we meet Alice Ovis, who's being sued by Bank of America for credit card debt.
Okay.
Her lawyer, Thomas Fidelis, brings in the CPA named Bruce Verax as an expert witness to challenge the very foundation of how this debt is created.
Interesting. So like setting the stage to dismantle the whole system.
Exactly.
Verax's testimony really gets to the heart of Kilpatrick's argument, drawing on, his experience auditing banks.
Oh, wow.
To reveal some pretty surprising insights.
Lay it on me.
So walk us through some of Verax's key points here.
Okay.
What's the first bombshell he drops?
Well, he starts by talking about something called asset-backed securities.
Okay.
These are investments that banks sell to big players like retirement funds. And here's the kicker.
Yeah.
They're selling the promise of future credit card debt before they even have the debt on their books.
Wait, so it's like selling a car you haven't even built yet.
Exactly. And that creates this huge incentive for banks to,
Right.
push credit cards and get people racking up debt because they need those cars rolling off the assembly line.
To make good on their promise.
To make good on those promises to investors.
So it's not just about offering credit. It's about ensuring people use it.
Yeah.
Get hooked on the debt cycle. Precisely. And to lure people in, banks dangle what Kilpatrick calls the free money trap.
Ooh.
Offering seemingly enticing credit limits and perks, like those $500 credit limit offers you see everywhere.
Yeah.
Like pre-approved.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like I had won the lottery when I got my first credit card.
Right. It creates this illusion of free money.
Yeah.
But Verax argues that once you make that first payment, the game changes completely.
He actually compares it to opening a checking account.
Right.
How does that work?
Think about it. You're essentially depositing money with the bank every time you make a payment on your credit card.
Okay.
It's not like you're paying down a loan in the traditional sense.
Oh, interesting. So they're using our own money against us, generating profits through interest and fees on what's essentially our own money.
That's Verax's argument.
Wow.
And here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
He goes on to question whether there's even a valid loan agreement in place for most credit cards.
Because without a legally binding agreement outlining the terms, is there even a real debt?
That's what Kilpatrick, through Verax, is suggesting.
Oh.
He argues that lack of a clear, enforceable contract could make the debt itself legally questionable. And this is the point where Fidelis, Alice's lawyer, really starts putting the screws to the bank's lawyer in the courtroom.
Oh. Okay, so how does the bank's lawyer respond to these accusations?
Oh, well, we'll have to wait till next time to find out.
Ooh, cliffhanger.
Yay!
All right, so we'll pick back up with this courtroom drama next time.
Next week, same time.
Make sure to tune in.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
See you then.
See you then.
So we've just heard about this courtroom battle where Kilpatrick, through this fictional CPA, is arguing that credit card debt might not even be legally valid. Sounds pretty wild, but I'm guessing it's just the tip of the iceberg. What does he suggest people actually do about it?
Well, that's where Forgive and Forget gets really practical. He lays out a series of steps you can take, even without a lawyer, to challenge your creditors and potentially even get your debt reduced or dismissed entirely.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the first move in Kilpatrick's playbook?
He calls it the demand letter. Essentially, it's a formal written request for specific information from your creditor. You're basically saying, hey, if you're going to claim I owe you money, you better prove it.
So it's like calling their bluff.
Yeah.
Right, like in that courtroom scene.
Exactly.
When Fidelis demanded to see the actual loan agreement.
Exactly. Kilpatrick believes most people just blindly accept what the banks tell them.
Uh-huh.
But legally, the burden of proof is on the creditor.
Right.
So in these demand letters, you're requesting things like a copy of the original signed contract, a detailed breakdown of all transactions and fees, documentation showing how the debt amount was calculated.
Okay, and if they can't produce that documentation?
That's where things get interesting. Kilpatrick argues that if a creditor fails to substantiate the debt,
Uh-huh.
it significantly weakens their position.
Right.
It can give you leverage to negotiate a settlement or even have the debt dismissed entirely.
Wow, so it's like turning the tables on them. Instead of them hounding you, you're putting them on the defensive. Does Kilpatrick give any guidance on how to actually write these demand letters?
Absolutely. He provides templates and sample language in the book so you don't have to start from scratch.
Right.
And he walks you through exactly what information to request and how to phrase your demands.
Okay, so demand letters, check.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next weapon in this debt nuking arsenal?
And another powerful tactic Kilpatrick emphasizes is disputing negative entries on your credit report.
Right, because if a debt is potentially illegitimate, it shouldn't be dragging down your credit score.
Exactly.
But how do you go about disputing those entries? It sounds kind of intimidating.
It's actually more straightforward than you might think. You can file disputes directly with the major credit reporting agencies, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Yep. And here's where those demand letters come in handy again.
You mean you can use the creditor's lack of response as evidence?
Exactly. If they haven't provided you with the necessary documentation to prove the debt, you can include that in your dispute. Kilpatrick also recommends citing specific violations of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which outlines consumer rights related to credit reporting.
So you're not just saying this is wrong, you're backing it up with legal arguments and evidence.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Are there any other strategies that Kilpatrick recommends?
He also talks about the possibility of filing for an injunction.
An injunction? That sounds serious. What exactly is that?
It's basically a court order that prohibits someone from doing something. In this context, Kilpatrick suggests that you could potentially file for an injunction to stop a creditor from pursuing a debt if they haven't been able to provide sufficient evidence.
So it's like a legal shield to protect yourself from harassment or unfair collection practices.
Exactly. It's a more aggressive tactic, and Kilpatrick acknowledges that it's not always necessary or appropriate.
Sure.
But it's an option he presents for those dealing with particularly difficult creditors or facing legal action.
Okay, so we've got this whole arsenal of strategies. Demand letters, credit report disputes, even injunctions. So for our listeners who are intrigued by Kilpatrick's arguments and want to learn more, what can they do?
Well, the Consumer Awareness Foundation is actually offering a free copy of Forgive and Forget on our website.
Fantastic.
We highly recommend checking it out if you want to dive deeper into these concepts and explore Kilpatrick's approach in detail.
That's great. Yeah. So be sure to visit our website for more information on how to get your free copy. And in the meantime, what are some key takeaways that our listeners can apply to their own financial lives right now?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is, the importance of questioning assumptions.
Right.
We often just accept these financial systems as they are without really understanding how they work or whether they're actually in our best interests.
Absolutely. And I think Kilpatrick challenges us to think critically about those things, right?
Yeah.
Things that we might just take for granted, like the idea that banks are lending us money when we use credit cards.
Right.
And, to really understand the terminology, not be afraid to ask questions.
And he also highlights the power of language.
Yeah.
Like, for example, he makes this distinction between currency and money.
Uh-huh.
I have to admit, I never really thought about those words as being different before I read this book.
Right.
But he does.
Yeah. And it's a subtle but important distinction that he uses to support his argument that banks aren't actually lending us money. Right.
In the traditional sense. And he also encourages us to pay attention to the language that's used in our credit card agreement.
The fine print.
And in our statements.
Yeah, it's like he's giving us this decoder ring to decipher the financial world.
Exactly.
He wants us to be informed consumers who understand the fine print and aren't afraid to kind of challenge the status quo.
It is, but I think it's a conversation worth having. Kilpatrick, whether you agree with him or not, is forcing us to think critically about the systems we often take for granted and to question assumptions about our financial obligations.
And even if you decide not to implement his specific strategies, his book can still be a valuable resource for understanding your rights as a consumer and for approaching debt with a more informed and empowered mindset.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, and the more you understand about your financial rights and obligations, the better equipped you'll be to navigate the complexities of personal finance and make decisions that protect your interests.
Well said. I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Forgive and Forget.
Yes. Thank you for listening, everybody.
And remember, Tommy Kilpatrick is offering a free 10-minute debt relief consultation for those seeking further guidance. Thank you for listening to another Consumer Awareness Foundation podcast.
Yes, and he provides some very specific steps that people can take to challenge their alleged debt,
Uh-huh.
including sample letters to send to banks,
Wow.
even strategies for filing a lawsuit if necessary.
Now, I know that taking legal action can be intimidating, but Kilpatrick seems to believe that it's a viable option in some cases.
He does, but he emphasizes that it's not a decision to be taken lightly.
Right.
And that it's important to seek professional legal counsel and understand the risks involved.
So for our listeners who, maybe are feeling overwhelmed by credit card debt, what's the most important message they should take away from this deep dive into Kilpatrick's book?
I think the key message is that you have options.
Okay.
You don't have to accept your debt as this inevitable burden. There are ways to challenge it, understand the system, and potentially find relief.
And knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely.
By educating ourselves about, our rights as consumers and the mechanics of these financial systems, we can make better decisions.
Yes.
And potentially even, change the system itself.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been incredibly eye-opening.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Forgive and Forget: How to Nuke Your Credit Card Debt by Tommy Kilpatrick.
Great book.
It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking conversation about a topic that affects so many people.
Millions.
And if you're interested in learning more and diving deeper into Kilpatrick's arguments, be sure to visit the Consumer Awareness Foundation website.
Yes.
To download a free copy of the book.
Absolutely. And remember,
yes,
the more informed we are as consumers, the better equipped we are to navigate these complex financial waters.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to another Consumer Awareness Foundation podcast.